Welcome to the Liberty Insider. This is a program designed to bring you up to speed with one of the many developments, and in the program, maybe several topics, developments relating to religious liberty in the US and around the world. My name is Lincoln Steed, editor of Liberty Magazine, and my guest on the program is Sonia DeWitt, attorney Sonia DeWitt, and Liberty author. Let's talk about something that's been troubling me for a long time now. I watch current events, and I know you do too, and it struck me as rather anomalous for a Western country, the United States, back in the Bush era, Bush son. Speech was a big issue, and they established free speech zones. You remember that? They didn't really want disruption to public events, so there was a roped-off area. Sometimes as much, I think in one case, 3 miles from where the president was, there would be a roped-off area entitled the Free Speech Zone where people could speak freely. How important is free speech to a modern democracy, to real freedom, and thereby to, of course, religious liberty, which is a vital freedom?
Well, free speech is obviously essential to any free society. If you don't have free speech, you don't have free thought, you don't have free exercise of religion, you don't have free communication about grievances. There are so many things that are impacted by free speech.
Now, is free speech good speech?
No, not necessarily. The old saying applies, I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
And I say that about religious liberty in general. I can have huge issues with someone else's faith. I can think it's puerile, foolish, or whatever. But if religious liberty means anything, I have to go to any length to defend someone's right to believe that.
If free speech is restricted for anybody, there's no free speech.
Yeah, and I think in our era right now, people have forgotten the basic dynamic that it's when speech is offensive to you that it's most important to protect it.
Right.
Nobody needs to protect agreeable speech, right?
No, something everybody likes doesn't need protection.
Right. Do you think we're in a period where, it's under some threat?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess there's different answers to that question. I think in the current administration, with the latest, the president's latest initiative threatening campuses who supposedly threatened.
Now, was it an executive order? I wasn't ever quite sure if it was formally, because an executive order is,
I believe it was
only a terminology, not a legal requirement.
It is an executive order, but it doesn't really do anything. I think what is more noteworthy about it is the fact that he felt it was necessary, and that I believe comes from this Christian right paranoia about their rights being infringed and them being victims of the secular society, which I think is a way overblown fear. They, maybe, I mean, there's opposition on both sides to the other side's viewpoints. There's no question about that. But are Christians being targeted for their viewpoints? I don't see that.
Well, to me, there's a couple of things at play on this issue of speech on college campuses. The president says he'll withhold the money, and that bothers me, whether or not he's the one to withhold it. On religious liberty, we've always cautioned against taking, especially church institutions, taking government money. But even a private institution taking government money means they're somewhat beholden, and there is a controlling interest. And when the government does partially fund something, we would expect as citizens in a country with the separation of church and state, that the government not be promoting any particular religious viewpoint or that institution with the government money, right? So it seems like Trump is trying to turn it on its head in some ways, if it's on behalf of the religious right.
Well,
to make sure that with the control of government money, they advance the concerns of a religious group.
Well, it's that concern is not overt. That's clearly a covert motivation, and that's not listed in his speaking about it or in the regulation itself.
No.
So,
but we can guess that.
But
the other thing that I wonder is it as simple as Ann Coulter was disinvited, I think, recently on a campus, and she has the ability to raise the president's ire on her behalf.
Or against her, as the case may be.
Well, yes, but yes, it's a very complicated relationship. But I think it's easily provable that on many public campuses and private campuses, except that overtly church-run ones, I think the intellectual environment is a little dismissive of what they see as historical, fundamental Christianity.
Well,
there's an element of sneering.
Well, certainly that's true.
But that's not going to be solved by a government edict.
Right, and that is their right.
Right.
As long as they don't engage, as long as they don't, overtly threaten or harass, they have the right to sneer all they want.
Yeah.
That's the function of free speech.
Yeah.
So sneering is.
Well, yeah. So we need to condition, especially since we're coming from a Christian community. Maybe we need to condition our fellow Christians to be able to bear a little bit of jeering and public shame.
Well,
on our Lord's behalf. I mean,
the Bible says those who live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution.
Suffer persecution.
So that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
And I don't think a little sneering is hardcore persecution.
No, not compared to what's going on in other parts of the world.
But it's a push me pull you sort of a question, because in addressing a concern, if the religious right are somewhat a force behind the scenes, then they're actually creating another problem, even as they're trying to solve one.
How do you see that?
Well, the government is in essence meddling in the free speech issue to increase their particular speech.
Yes, well,
free speech is not something that can be forced.
That goes back to the whole Christian right agenda.
Yes.
That they want to control every area of life so that their agenda is advanced.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much a part of their whole agenda. You want to make sure that Christians and Christians of their variety have preference in every sphere.
Now, we don't much talk about it on this program, or at least haven't in the past, but I know there's a strong movement at the United Nations promoted by a whole a front of countries, most of which are Islamic culture, which sort of colors the way they look at this issue. And they're pressuring there to be an international understanding against defamatory religious speech. Well, we don't want to encourage loose and negative talk about any religion. But when you're protecting free speech, I don't think this is right to penalize someone that says something that's offensive to another religion, because depending how you define it, just explaining, say, a doctrinal error, or saying I have a more satisfactory religion, which is in essence what evangelists are doing all the time, that can be taken as offensive by someone that chooses to. And is that going to be criminalized? Or at the very least, that just inhibits your ability to talk about your own religion. Right.
Yeah, and I think that proselytizing is a covert, preventing proselytizing is a covert reason for that emphasis. They want to avoid, because as you know, a lot of Islamic countries forbid proselytizing by anyone who's not Muslim. So
I think most of them do one way or another. Yeah. No, it's a big problem. It's a big problem, and I think we're headed down that track even in the West because we don't want to offend. There's political correctness. He's now no longer Pope, but I remember Benedict took a speech at Regensburg University where he told a historical tale. He didn't even make up the thing or put any slant on it. Just told a story of a discussion between a Muslim military commander and a Byzantine emperor. And Muslims went on a violent streak all around the world. He should have had the right to speak.
well, you have, Salman Rushdie threatened
Right,
with
his
death
life was threatened.
because he wrote a novel.
Well, yeah, very complex. He mentioned something that many Muslim scholars know about. There's some passages in the Quran that are inexplicable, and they've been called, and he called them in his book, satanic verses, because they don't seem to come from the angel. So it was a deeply theological argument. It wasn't just a maligning statement against Islam, but that was unacceptable. Of course, it wasn't really so long ago in the West and even in the US where you could be severely punished for blasphemy, speaking against Christianity or taking the name of God in vain. Neither of which is a good thing, but it's a bit horrific to think you could end up in the stocks or severely fined or ostracized for the sort of behavior that any longshoreman now indulges himself endlessly.
Yes, in fact, in the decades leading up to the Civil War, blasphemy laws were very common, and you could be criminally punished for speaking against Christianity. And moreover, Protestantism was taught in public schools, and they read from the Protestant Bible and prayed Protestant prayers, and any Catholic child or anyone else who objected would be punished if they didn't participate. So it's actually pretty disturbing that that kind of de facto establishment continued that late, and that people were being forced to comply with the Protestant religious viewpoint.
But we've moved on from that, haven't we? And not all of the social changes that have gone with the liberalisation are good, but it does sort of beg the question, what would happen if religion was reinstated in society? Would that mean reimposition of such things? Could we have a spiritual rejuvenation as a nation without an unnecessary spillover into legal prohibitions?
Well, I think my opinion is that the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think you can have a revival using legal means.
That's a good point. But you can have a resurgence of interest in religion.
Well, yes, and that's happened multiple times in our country. We had two Great Awakenings, and there's been many times when...
I hope the Great Awakenings were more than just a societal shift. There was deep.
Well, that was my
renewal.
point. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about the spiritual renewal as opposed to legal enforcement of Christian doctrine. And I think those two are really mutually exclusive because you can't force a genuine renewal or revival.
Which is something that those in the Christian community who are pushing for political actions should keep in mind.
Yes.
That's not how these Great Awakenings worked. They didn't go to the lawyers or to the legislators. They went to their Bibles, they went to camp meetings. Even without PA system, they listened to George Whitefield in the First Great Awakening. I was just listening to one of his sermons the other day on a CD rather. Powerful stuff, even read in a measured tone by the narrator. Still very good sermons. I can see why people were affected by it. This is a time for a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back to continue free speech, which means we are free to speak freely on this program. Welcome back to Liberty Insider. Before the break, we were heavy into freedom of speech, right? is freedom of speech the real freedom that defines Western democracy versus some other countries? I'm asking that, believing that's almost answers itself, isn't it? Doesn't it?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I think all the freedoms are intertwined. So how do you separate them? I would say freedom of religion is very central because that involves freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. But all of them are so intertwined. It's hard to
true. We had a speaker once for our annual Liberty dinner, and the speaker made the comment that religious freedom is sort of the litmus test for all freedoms. But freedom of speech put into action automatically allows religion full expression. It automatically allows political activity. I mean, it really clears the way for almost everything, doesn't it?
Well, there's more involved in religion. There's practice, which doesn't necessarily involve speech. Speech is kind of a limited. It involves some conduct, but it doesn't involve all conduct.
Yeah, I was thinking of speech as public expression. So yeah, I guess you could have silent practice, but it's always struck me that most countries in the world, communism and the late Soviet Union as a prime example, did have a guarantee of freedom of religion.
Yes.
But they didn't really have the full guarantee of freedom of speech. So it became a hypothetical, just look good. They didn't really allow it. Where if they'd had freedom of speech, it would go to the practical level. But I've noticed that. In fact, I'll tell a story that I've told before because it really impressed me at the time. I heard an interview on BBC Radio with the foreign minister from the Maldives, just a little cluster of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Nice tropical environment, only a few 100,000 citizens, all Muslim. And the BBC interviewer asked him what it was like, and wonderful free country, we have freedom of this, freedom of that, no social problems. And he said, and he asked him, he says, do you have freedom of religion? Oh, absolutely, full freedom of religion. And he said, well, I'm a Christian, if I came there, would I be allowed to practice my faith? And the guy instantly became offended, and he says, absolutely not. He says, we might as well invite Al-Qaeda into our country. So in other words, this is poison. You can't spread what you've got here. So I think freedom of speech, you're right, they're all intertwined, but there's something to pick up. It's a wonderful freedom that certainly gives a dynamic expression, has to, speech to religion wherever it's really honoured. Martin Luther, I mean, he nailed things supposedly to the door. The historians are liking to say now that he didn't really nail it, but it's certain that he stood up and held forth and railed against the Pope and said some quite seditious things for the time. They couldn't stop him, and of course, as a result, the whole world was changed, or at least the European world. So what can you think of any other examples, present-day examples, both in the negative and the positive, where freedom of speech is vital and might be threatened or might be challenged?
Well, interestingly enough, we were just talking about a case that was recently decided in which Justice Thomas basically was trying to overturn, he wasn't fortunately in the majority, but his opinion, he said he would overturn the standard for defamation for public figures.
Yeah, you mentioned it, yeah.
And that is very disturbing because that standard was set in the civil rights movement, and they had the government leaders, I believe it was in Alabama, had sued the New York Times because of their reporting on what was going on in the civil rights movement. And they had won a very large judgment, which basically shut down all the reporting on that issue for years until the Sullivan case was decided. And the Sullivan case stood for the proposition that you have to have actual malice. You have to, the person suing you has to show that you intended to publish false statements. And that gave a lot of protection to people, to journalists writing about these issues. And Thomas wants to lower that so that a public figure can successfully sue a journalist for making statements against them. And that's very disturbing.
So he's sort of playing tag with the president's view that the media are playing with,
right.
with fake news.
When Trump is trying to find a way to sue Saturday Night Live and calling everything fake news, that's a very, very disturbing opinion.
I mean, there is fake news floating around. There's no question about it. Misinformation is another word. But to plant the idea in the general populace that the vast majority of information floating around, particularly information counter to what, say, a president or a public official might say that by definition is fake news, is really to confuse people's powers of perception, it seems to me.
Well, there's plenty of fake news going around, and most of it is favorable to Trump. So.
Well, be careful. But we're commenting on this. We're not necessarily for or against any government leader, but we have to critique any country, any administration, any particular leader that speaks against basic freedoms and restricts religious liberty. I do think the United States has been a continuing bulwark of Western liberal values. And as you would argue, and had in another program, the Constitution has given a bedrock point from that. But things are changing. And I think we have to speak out, we have to raise an alarm, use free speech. I mean, it's really the only weapon to argue against losing that weapon. That's the great irony.
Right.
Well, I guess there's the pen, but to me, that's communication. It's still...
well, speech includes written speech
as well. Yes, has to, yeah. Pen is mightier than the sword, they say.
Right.
They say as they stab someone with the... I think I go back further than most people, because when I was in public school in Australia, we used to have our own little inkwell on our desk with the nib that you dipped in the thing, and they were pretty sharp, I'll tell you. But words spoken or written are powerful, and clearly it was written and spoken language that was the genesis to the whole American Revolution.
Right.
Thomas Paine and
right.
A whole bunch of other writers at the time informed and changed public opinion. They didn't have radio. They didn't have the ability to speak instantly like through the internet and that we now have. But I think that explains why stuff's on fast forward now. The communication is there, but it's being questioned, and people are not real sure. So, as the Bible says, every wind of doctrine flowing, right?
Right, and there's a lot of anyone can put up a website and say whatever they want. Yeah. So there's a lot less restriction, and there's a lot less controls on what is published and whether the credibility of it. Yeah. So that's a problem in this current environment where it's hard to know what's true because there's so much information coming out, and anybody can just put up whatever they want, and how do you know whether it's true or not?
So how do we know? This is the takeaway. With free speech, a necessary part of our freedoms, but you and I and our viewers, how can we be part of a successful dynamic of testing what we hear and of being part of a process of disseminating accurate information? Is there a principle?
Well, I think it's important that people be intelligent readers and read carefully. Use several different sources, use credible sources that you know that have built-in credibility, that have a history of credibility. It's very important to check anything that you read against something else, not just to believe everything you read. It's important to be a critical thinker and say, does this make sense? Does it fit with other things that I know? And an educated populace is the greatest guard for liberty.
As a child, my father took me several times in Sydney, Australia, where we lived, to Hyde Park, whereas the Hyde Park in England, in London, anybody could get the soapbox and stand up and hold forth on any topic, as seditious as that might be, as offensive as it might be. They had the right. I think the Western freedom that we've experienced, or most of us in the West, is wonderful. The freedom to speak your mind. Not always that way. I've been affected deeply since traveling to Cambodia and seeing there in the killing fields a memorial to people imprisoned for nothing more than just knowing something, having glasses, having education, hearing about a young woman executed for silently, almost inaudibly, singing to herself in the middle of the night next to other prisoners a pop song from Happier Days. For that she was executed. As Christians, as people of faith, as people of any faith, we have to take it as an obligation, as the Bible says, to sing songs in the night. No matter how desperate the situation, we need to sing of our Creator. We need to proclaim in words that cannot be chained or restricted our faith in God and our hope for the future and our certainty that there will be a day of redemption. For Liberty Insider, this is Lincoln Steed.